Well, the Illinois legislature in yesterday. They were in for 3 days this week. They're off until February 20th when they're set to come back and jump into the budget conversations. Will we see much happen before the March 19th primary? That's a big question. And I think that's going to play pretty heavy on what happens and how quick it may happen. This being an election year, each state house seat is up for grabs. You've got primaries with Republicans challenging Republicans and some Democrats finding some challengers in their districts, and all of this, of course, leading up to the November election. But with now between March 19th, we're going to see anything happen because it was pretty slow this week. This week we had a slew of news conferences with legislators laying out all of their different priorities, everything from a child tax credit to changing the estate tax for small farms to bringing about some kind of property tax relief for the state of Illinois, which regularly finds itself in the top of the most expensive states in the country. You also had some conversations about ethics and social media and whether or not infertility treatment is going to be included in insurance policies and a whole host of other things that were on people's minds at the State House. But not a lot of action in as far as legislation advancing. We did have a measure in the House advance out of the Energy Committee that would change the setbacks for how close solar installations can be to residential areas. So we'll see that conversation play out. But you also had a conversation about the cost of non-citizen health care, foreign nationals in the state of Illinois that get taxpayer subsidized health care. And this is an interesting conversation in as far as the state departments that handle this, telling the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules this week a variety of things. But if you check out the Center Square/Illinois, you can see this story, increasing taxpayer costs for non-citizen health care continues to raise, and those concerns are rising right along with it. So let's get to this story where you've got taxpayer costs and the possible budgets that's going to be in the negative with possible deficits. The concern is that taxpayers are going to continue eating up these subsidies for the non-citizen health care. So you had some Republican state senators, Sue Rezin, Don DeWitt, Dave Severson, Chapin Rose. They held a news conference yesterday spelling out their concerns, saying that initially the governor wanted a $550 million budget for the non-citizen migrant health care, but that's ballooned to about $770 million. So they held a news conference yesterday saying that money should be used for people who live in Illinois, who are residents of Illinois, legal residents of Illinois. The Illinois Department of Healthcare and Human Service and Family Services, they told JCAR this week that nearly all of the copays have been eliminated for migrants. And State Senator Chapin Rose said everybody in the state that's here working every morning, getting their kids off to school, they have to pay copays. He said anybody listening, watching, or reading this report gets up, goes to work, and does their job. They pay their healthcare premium. They pay their kids' ER copays. They pay their kids' doctor copays. And then non-citizens show up, and it's free. He said this is nuts. So enrollees for the various programs for non-citizens, the adults over 42 and the seniors over 65, they do pay a $250 copay for inpatient hospitalizations, but emergency room visits are excluded. State Senator Sue Rezin, she went on to talk about how all of this really is overly burdensome and is costing taxpayers down the line. So clearly that's an interesting budget buster that Republicans are worried about, as it's projected there could be $700 million deficit in the coming fiscal year. So are we going to see a lot of conversation before the March 19th primary on how to address the migrant health care crisis, let alone the 35,000 non-citizens who are in this state in the past 16 months being bused from the southern U.S. border to Chicago, a proclaimed sanctuary city, and to Illinois, a proclaimed sanctuary state. Governor J.B. Pritzker, he will be holding two separate events today across the state where he's promoting his Smart Start initiative, and that's an initiative to bolster early childhood development, but that's going to, it's already costing $250 million if he's wanting to increase that and its continued program. That's going to be more spending. And how do you balance a potential $700 million budget deficit with the growing non-citizen healthcare costs that are $770 million, and if not plus $1 billion, and so on? How do you balance launching new programs and increasing new programs when you've got this thing that you've already promised, let alone the pension cost and the other post-employment benefits for public employee retirees, let alone just all of the other debt service that the state has to have, and the ongoing expenditures for the state's priorities. So that's an interesting conversation that's definitely going to be had here. But some other headlines from across the states. You've got the ongoing concerns of law enforcement when it comes to police and how some are looking to regulate police. We talked with the president of the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police, Chris Southwood, yesterday. And if you missed that conversation, be sure to check out the clipped segments here. But as I wrote for thecentersquare.com, police group raises concerns about Illinois' criminal justice policies. So we talked with Southwood about House Bill 4603. It would prohibit police from pulling people over for certain violations, like speeding over a certain amount, like having excessive tint, not having a seatbelt, and a variety of other things. While Slaughter said that he doesn't want this to advance, it's a conversation starter, Southwood said it's a bad idea and it's actually a conversation ender. But that's not where it stops. You have others at the Statehouse pushing for other legislation. Senate Bill 2535 from State Senator L.G. Sims that would create the Youth Nonviolent Crimes Resource Program with the goal, he said, of reducing crime. And he said this is on top of other measures that they're looking to reduce crime with, including the SAFETY Act. That's the Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Act. But Southwood, he said that what needs to happen is they need to be prosecuting crimes. But there's also the story we touched on out of Dalton, where a defendant was facing murder charges, and he was awaiting trial on electronic monitoring before being suspected of a mass shooting. This is raising some questions about other elements of the Pretrial Fairness Act and the SAFETY Act that has people concerned. This electronic monitoring provision, because the electronic monitoring provision, it allows for 2 8-hour periods of free movement time per week for such defendants. Southwood said that's proving to be dangerous because, as ABC7 reported, Tory Lewis and another individual were found shot by police in a vehicle at an auto parts supply store in Dalton earlier this month with gunshot wounds. 2 other men with gunshot wounds were found outside the vehicle, and Lewis, he was out on bond. Now, just to make sure people understand, Lewis was not out on bond because of the end of money bond. He was actually out on bond facing murder charges. Back in 2020, years before the state ended cash bail, all right? And it was during the COVID-19 peak where they were actually letting a lot of people out of county jails for, concerns over their own health and spread of COVID and so on. So they let Lewis out with bond during that time frame. And this, again, was at least a full year before the SAFETY Act and the Pretrial Fairness Act was passed. If you recall, even the Pretrial Fairness Act was, litigated, and that didn't actually come into effect, I believe, until sometime in September of last year. So Lewis out on bond and on electronic monitoring, but not because of the end of cash bond. Again, he was out years before the end of cash bond. But it's the electronic monitoring that has people concerned here because of this provision in the Pretrial Fairness Act about allowing people who are on electronic monitoring awaiting trial, allowing them to have 2 8-hour a week times that they can go out and take care of certain things. So clearly that's something that law enforcement are critical of. Even the Cook County Sheriff's Office has been critical of this. But the Illinois Network for Pretrial Justice, they shared with me a statement that the Dalton case is isolated and the vast majority of people on electronic monitoring return to court and are not rearrested awaiting trial. They said there's nothing in Illinois law requiring the sheriff to stop tracking individuals during this time. For years, the Cook County Sheriff's Office denied people on electronic monitoring the ability to contribute to their households, perform life-affirming tasks, and even access health care. The electronic monitoring reforms in the Pretrial Fairness Act are intentionally designed to correct that history. So clearly some interesting back and forth when it comes to police concerns at the Illinois Statehouse. And what we're going to see happen, if anything, when it comes to criminal justice or when it comes to the issues of regulating police officers as well. So that's a space we'll watch closely. You've also got Illinois Republicans. They're laying out their session priorities and something that they're in the super minority in the state of Illinois. But obviously, they want to see some things happen. So House Minority Leader Tony McCombie and several other Republican leaders in the Illinois House held a news conference yesterday where they spelled out what they want to see. Obviously, they want to see some ethics reforms at the State House. It was mentioned that, ensuring that there's independence with the legislative inspector general, ensuring that, everything's above board when it comes to those who are lobbyists and that type of thing. But ethics reforms, obviously, something that's top of mind. Other things dealing with spending priorities, ensuring that construction projects are being delivered in a timely fashion to keep up with infrastructure and making sure that that's done not just for Democrat districts, but also for Republican districts, and a whole host of other concerns that they've raised. But you also had on the House floor the concerns of the migrant crisis brought up by House member Martin McLaughlin. You also had the Invest in Kids program raised as a concern. And that's that school choice scholarship program where people could donate privately to an organization that would give grants to families who want to send their kid to a private school. And those who donated got a 75% Illinois income tax credit. And that program was ended at the end of the year because legislators in fall session did not re-up it. So there's actually schools that are looking to close because of it. So clearly that's an ongoing area where we may see some action at the Illinois Statehouse. So that's just a little bit of a review here, right? Again, are we going to see any major movements on much of anything before the March 19th primary? It's a great question. There's going to be a lot of news conferences and a lot of position pieces and some talk of legislation, but when you get down to it, what really is going to happen between now and March 19th, who knows? We've got the budget address February 21st from Governor J.B. Pritzker. And then after that, you may see some budget conversations, but I think after the March 19th primary, you're going to see full court press to late May when the legislature is going to be hot and heavy in the middle of spring session. So we'll be tracking all of that for you, and be sure to like, subscribe, follow along if you want to stay plugged into what's happening at the Illinois Statehouse. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out with me each and every weekday morning. It's a blast to be with you, and I really do appreciate you guys being here. Let's see if you got something to say, all right? Let's do in the Discord where we'll open things up and see if you guys can call in and sound off, all right? So get into your calls. And I see a couple of people already in the Discord channel. But if you want to join me, come on in. All right, let's make it happen. It's Bishop on Air.